All right. So this is how to set up a 2D environment from scratch. And this will fit what we're doing in the class pretty much one-to-one. The important things that we're going to look at is following up on having created um, a series of sprites in Photoshop and then importing them into Unity. So that we did before. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the sprites and we'll try to figure out how to get them in the scene, how to set up the camera, get all of those details correctly so that you can quickly set up your own 2D game-based scene. And then it'll also be set up so that when we add Vuforia, that will also be compatible. So I've found all these different ways that work. The universal render pipeline does work, but let's just go with the 3D one, and we'll go 2D test scene. So we'll just go with that. We're going to try to do it from scratch so that no matter what, everyone gets the right plugins and everything. So right now it's launching. And then what I mean by the right plugins is we need the 2D sprite, we need the Photoshop importer, and then I think for other things we'd need Vuforia and other stuff. But for this, I think we're only going to need some pretty basic stuff. So here's like our sample scene. So I'm going to do a new scene. I'm going to save it and call it 2D setup scene, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to use it to set up our 2D environment. Right now, it's only got all the defaults. So the way that we want to like look at the world for us, and I'm going to maximize it so it gets as big as we can go. Okay, so right now it's a 3D scene, but we're going to try to set it up for 2D. And that's going to be important because we want compatibility between the 3D spaces and the 2D spaces. The 2D is going to be our preference. And the way we can sort of see what the 2D world is just by clicking the 2D symbol. So 2D, 3D, 2D, 3D. It allows you to just pop back and forth because we're basically building a 2D world in a 3D space. And then if I go out of here, I still have the handles and I can look at everything and I can look around the world. I can grab and pan. Then the next portion is that the world has basically a single light and a main camera. So we want to like basically get that main camera to work for us the way we want to do it in 2D game. And what that means is there's all these camera settings. It's the main camera. If we're working with Vuforia, you'll have the Vuforia be the main camera, but it'll be the Vuforia camera. Now we have a skybox, all this. So you see blue and that gray, that's your skybox. Perspective is what we're looking for, and orthographic is the way to do it. So orthographic now is got a 2D world exactly set up, and the camera is basically box on. And what I mean by that is this is looking at the world in a 2D way, and the perspective is straight on from the camera position. So if I look here, I have a little camera view on the bottom corner here, and it's just straight on. We don't have anything in here yet to really see what's happening, but that's what's going on. Now, if I click out of 2D, you'll be able to see some interesting stuff. If I look at the side of the camera and I kind of zoom around, the camera looks like a box. So that means the lens that the camera is using is no distortion, straight on. So that's what's going on when I hit 2D. It moves it so that we're looking straight down the camera at the environment. Then we're in the scene view. So this tells us what's in our scene, and all we have is that light right there. So we have some light. So this is also a little bit weird, which is that you've got 3D lighting for your 2D world, and that's okay for this. We're not doing anything where that lighting will the 2D version of this is fine. It'll calculate it correctly. So no big deal there, but we're going to use 3D lighting on a 2D space. The other part is the game clip here. In the game area, it allows you to like set your game up in different ways. And one of the things you can do is I want these different aspect ratios. So 4:3, 16:9. These are like, well, hold it, I want it to be on mobile. So you're like, oh, I need an aspect ratio for mobile. So you'd have to have those in there for it. or I'm like, my screen is 1080p, so I have a 1080p resolution. So this is a little extra tech, but it will make like working with the scene a little bit easier. So anyway, I'm right now at 1080p. So that'll be like full screen desktop friendly instead of, what we can do is we'll just do it like 16:9. So we'll put you in portrait mode. So when the scene here hits play, it will just basically take the environment and move it to 16:9. So the ratio will stay the same, whatever the resolution is. So it'd be like turning your phone sideways and working at those different resolutions. So anyway, more to come on that, but that's just that's what we're looking at scene wise. I've also moved things around a bit. So I've got my project layout information here, and we have it all blank. I'm going to create a folder for sprites. So we'll hold our sprites in here. And this is the next part. We need to get our packages. I'm going to move this around too. I can just click on the tabs and move stuff around. So I want my inspector to be a little bit closer. So I'll just do this. Okay, so then up in the menu under window is our package manager. And the package manager is where we're gonna get our add-ons. So that looked like that loaded okay. I'm gonna click in here and I'm gonna look for all this 2D stuff. So we need 2D, and I need the Photoshop importer. And the cool part is it installs all of the dependencies really nicely. So we don't have to go hunt down everything we need for the 2D importer. And the other fun part is that it will actually grab some of the relevant things like 2D sprite and stuff. It may pick those up too. And we'll find out because we need the 2D sprite editor so that it'll break the Photoshop file into the sprites we need. So, and that takes a little bit. And it's moving on through. Yep. So I'll mention now there is another program called Krita. Krita will let you save in a Photoshop format, and then you can go to Photoshop and then save it as the Photoshop big, and then it'll import it in like sprites. But you can also do what we call a sprite sheet, which is just take all the individual items and put them on a transparent background PNG, and that will work too. Anyway, here we go. Sprite, 2D sprite. Did it. Actually, we've got all of our 2D stuff that we need right now. So next up is I need that sprite. So I've been playing around with the mural from one of the streets. So let me pull this up. Oop, I have a full screen going on. I'm just going to move this here. Try to not lose my. Yeah, so I have a Baird Street. That's the one that I was working with. And I've been doing different versions of the PSB file. So there's one called Full Stroke, because that one actually has like the cartoon style stuff in it. So let's say that was the one I was interested in. Then it's a PSB file, and we would use that. Okay, so let me move this around a little bit. I'm going to have to go out of full screen for a sec so I can have both on my screen at once. And I'm going to just drag into the sprite folder this one. And it does take a little bit of processing time. But the cool part is, one is it's going to recognize all of those nice Photoshop features. And let's see here. Oops. It does take a second or two. So I'm going to let that go. And then over here, it's showing me some other stuff while it's importing. So I'm just going to double click on this to show the Photoshop file. So this is the Photoshop file, and you see it's got all of the individual items subtracted out. And this actually allows you to then go in and try to get your layers and then get different pieces of the layers for the world. And then you can isolate the table, things like that. But it's got, say, layer 1, these all need names, and they're all hidden right now. And then mural cut, that was the cut that we use for the mural. And then there's things like outlines. If I move this one, you can see there's some outlines. So there's a good way, like you can select all the edges and then say fill the edges. So that's a good way to do the comic book. We'll have more, or the coloring book. I'll have more on that to come. But all right, so this one brought in that Bayard Street. Oh, everything is hidden. This is actually really important, is that when you work with these files, you can hide stuff, and we hid everything. So that would be good that I actually pulled up Photoshop, because Photoshop is being imported, yeah, no problem. But what's going on is we hid all the files. We hid all the layers specifically. So let's get all this back. So I want the background, for instance. I want all of this information. So one thing I found is to get this, I need them all to show. So if I click and hold, I can just scroll through everything, and it will actually go through and highlight all of the images. So now I have a bad naming scheme, but I have everything selected. So now I would do, let's say, save that file, and that saves everything into its individual slot. Yep. So that's the deal. If you hide stuff, it won't go into the transfer. So let's do that again. We'll go over to Unity, and I need to go and find my file. So this is the one that we just edited now. So grab that, drop it. Hopefully, I think I was too fast. I want to grab this, hover it, let it drop. And now it's going to take that time again. But this time we really have sprites. And it will give us a lot of fun sprites. And then I'll just go pop back. The other fun part is if you hit the Option or the Alt key, you can hide everything but one layer and then go back to it. I've learned a lot of neat little tricks working with layers in this. So those Alt plus the click on the eye hides and shows. Those are pretty cool. Let's see. Let's pop back over to Unity. It's still working, but it should be done soon. Yeah. So like if you did this with a single PNG with all of the character pieces all laid out separately, it would be able to find all of these items and recognize them, and it would be a lot faster. But right now it's like going through each layer, setting up the sprite, and it's doing it for like 70 items or something. So it should take a while. The other part is, since it's actually not done importing, I can't just skip ahead. So, oh, there it goes. All right, so let's click here and look at all the layers. So there are all the objects in here. So we're pretty pleased about that. I'm going to move this by just grabbing the project tab, and I want to get it so I can see it more clearly. I think I decided the inspector. Just click here on the edges and drag it around. So yeah, so you can see like I have all the different layers. I have persons now selected. So if I wanted the people, I have them. I have all the food. And okay, so yeah, so it actually imported most of this really nicely. So one of the questions is, okay, what do we need to do to get these in here and get something interesting to happen? All right, so I'm looking through my sprites, looking at all the different ways they're organized. I've got some different mural cutouts. And the idea right now is to just kind of brainstorm and get some fun stuff. So like if I grabbed that background image, I can just grab this one here and I'll move it in. And you'll see the background images is a lot larger than the whole screen. So like, okay. And that pulled in, oh, every single layer. So like, that's what we don't want to accidentally do, is bring in everything. So I'm just going to click this. I'm going to hit background here. But there is an interesting part about this before I forget, is that one of the ways this is structured, it is one object with everything in it. And one of the deals is you can hide and unhide stuff. So if you were trying to take the box here, I can basically make things go and deactivate them. But really, I need to get rid of this whole thing. I just want some items. So it's like, I want like layer 10. So I'm still having that. There's something going on here. I think I have to let me look at this. It starts over again at a certain point. Oh, it counts for some reason. It does one, which holds everything. And then like, let's say I want person, I can drag. So someplace in here, it's got like, here are all the sprite pieces. And then you'll see the numbering system start over again. And when that numbering system starts over again, like here, this background, that's actually what you're looking for. So if I wanted to like put a background in that just had a, you know, a blank for where the mural was, you know, now I could do that. But I want to do just collisions and I want to make something that's pretty fun. So this one is like a little person, but they're not all together. You can do all these different things. So classic. Shift spacebar will also go full screen, individual screen, just FYI. All right, so I would say I like the flowers. We're just gonna make something quick with the flowers. I'm gonna grab 3 different flowers here and I'm gonna put them in the world, and if I hit F, it zooms in. So I've got the flowers that I like, and I'm just gonna click and drag, and I can just click and drag them to different places. So I'll just do this. And we're also zoomed in. I'm going to take the person out because the person is more part of like a puzzle or something where you're trying to assemble them. We can do something fun with just the flowers. The other part is we can select all of them. You can shift click and select, and then you can kind of do group operations. So that's also pretty fun. So I can and now essentially I've made a small play field. You want to make everything in the play field for what you're doing. Now, I said this is all 2D, so if I hit play, I'll be able to see it in the game environment and see what the game does at this point. And it just floats stuff there. So like, okay, well, it's floating. That's fine. But now we want to do something a little more. We want to like figure out, can they collide or can they move? How do we make them do something interesting? So one is I can rename things, and I can say, oh, this is flower. You know, so one of the things to do is if you do the naming convention in Photoshop, you don't have to like rename things in here. So, all right, because my organizational brain is saying things called layers don't tell me anything, but if you tell me a flower is a flower and they're different than each other, I'm good with that. So right now, there we go. And then we've got the lighting. So we've got that light already here. So we're just using default everything. All right. So long story short on this is that if we want something to collide, we need to get a collider. And we need to add, and the other part is I can select all the things I want to give something to all at once, which is really cool. So I want all the flowers to have a collider. So I can go to add component, and I can go to physics 2D, because that's what we're working on, is physics 2D. And I can say I want there's something called a box collider. The box collider is just put a box around it. And in our case, we want a polygon collider because we want, in this case, to have something that surrounds each of these objects and gives us the shape of the star, right? We want those kinds of colliders. We want something that's more like the shape of the flower or the star. So when it interacts with things, it's going to have that capability. So, and if I want to remove it, I just hit remove. I want to add collider, I go to physics and a polygon 2D collider, and then there it is. So like, again, each one of these is now something that can be collided into. So if I click and drag this around, I hit play, we don't have much going on, right? Nothing. So we can collide them, but we haven't made them real. We haven't given them what you call a rigid body. They don't collide yet with anything because they can't go anywhere. So we need to enable it so the physics system says, hey, these are here for fun and doing something cool with. So if I grab one of these guys, I'm going to say, why don't I turn this particular flower into something that knows about gravity, and this one will know, what is it? Instead of, it won't know about gravity, but I'm going to try to get this one to bounce around through here. So I'm going to go and add a rigid body. I can go to Physics 2D, and it'll say rigid body 2D. So let's find out. I'm just going to hit play, and it'll finally run the thing, and there it goes. Now it's stuck, right? Because it's actually bumping into things. You'll see that the collider isn't quite at the full edge. So that's one of the other areas, is that the better the shape is recognized, the more these edges will fit. So we have basically a collider that's a little okay, because it's not the full box, but it's still kind of not super great. But that's what this particular collider will do. And in fact, I think that if you do a different version of this with the PNG with a transparent background, it will actually do the collider perfect. So I'll show a version of doing that too. But we're just trying to do something to play around and get this working. So, all right, so we have gravity running, and let's say we're bumping into things. Yeah, but let's make the whole world be much more interesting, right? I'm going to add collider. I'm going to make everything that. So I'm going to search for collider, and I want physics, rigid body. Oh, not collider, right? It was rigid body 2D, and that's added in. And this one was the other one that wasn't moving. So I want to add rigid body 2D. So it remembers what the search was. And then here's the other part, is that we actually gravity's on, but nothing to collide into. So this is where we can use 3D objects and find a way to get them to be collidable. So what we want to do is add, say, a cube. And we're going to make a cube big enough to be part of the ground. So I'm going to do right click, 3D object, cube. And right now we're in the 2D space, so you can only see the cube from the 2D angle, which is perfectly fine. But I need to position this a little bit more. So I'm going to use the Q, W, and E, and I'm going to stretch this out going one direction. There we go. And then I'm going to stretch it the other direction. And now I need to kind of look around. I need to see, is this, how does this relate to what we see on the screen? So I'm going to go back to 2D. I'm like, it's totally above everything. So Q, W, W, and then I'll pull this down. And you can hide this, you can put it behind things, but what we want to do is make sure that it can be collided with. But, we're going to do what we do. We just hit the play button and see what happens. And goes right through the object. All right. So this is where, like in 3D world, you'd have 3D colliders that you need to put on here, where we're in 2D, but we have to do something really special. There's a thing called an empty, and an empty is essentially a game object with no properties, and you add those properties that you want it to have to that game object. And this is an empty game object. Okay. So what it does is a cube can't have a 2D collider. It can, but it won't work. It just doesn't understand how to make a 2D thing a 3D thing and a 3D thing a 2D thing. But you can make the attached game object a 2D collider, and that is the trick we're going to use. So we're going to take that game object. You can see all it has is this virtual position. The other part to notice is you can have objects inside of objects, and I have a game object inside my cube. And that's another nice organizing technique, is you can organize by having parent and child type sort of scenarios. Long story short, let's hit game, let's say add component, and I want it not to be a rigid body, right? Because I don't want it to move, I want it to collide. So I'm just type in collide, and a box collider is perfect for a cube. So put the box collider on it, we're looking at it from a 2D position, click here, hit play, and we should see these things drop. Bloop. And there's our physics. So essentially, anytime you want to introduce or create something real quick, you can do, I want a sphere. So I can grab a sphere, and I'm going to just move it around. So I'm going to have that sphere just floating in there for it to collide with, right? But I can't do it unless I have that game object. So I need to right click. I need to say create empty, make sure that it's inside. You can drag these around, by the way. Just drag it there. I got to drag it on, and then there it goes. Now I need to come back over. I need to get my box collider. And now you can see here, Oh, zoom in. That's what a box collider looks like, but this is a sphere. So I'm going to click the little 3 dots. I'm going to say remove component, go back to add component. And now, hey, look, we have a sphere collider. That will actually be the correct shape. So poof, got it. And if I hit play now, our objects are going to interact. Oh, did they? No. So I did something.
The sphere collider is in 2D.
Oh, thank you. Really good. Yeah. So it's also really easy to make mistakes. And I've hunted errors like this for a really long time, going like, yeah, it was a sphere collider, but no, it's a sphere collider 3D. And you just saw like the objects falling through. Oh my gosh. Cool. That is like one of those crazy ones. So I wanted the sphere collider, but I didn't want that. I want the I can go over here to physics 2D. And I can say, where's
I
my...
think it's a circle collider.
Oh, right, because it's not a sphere. So you... there it goes. It is now a circle collider on a sphere because it's on the empty. There we go. Okay, so this will totally work. All right, there we go. Boom, boom. Yeah. So this is how you get it to basically have some reality. You know, these things now collide, they bounce, you've got 3D objects that you can create on the fly. So now you're kind of able to mix and match 3D with 2D by doing that little game object trick. Now, I think there's one more really fun thing to do that I wanna show. Go back out of assets. Is that, let's say we wanted our flowers to have some sort of special behavior, like maybe they're bouncy flowers. So it turns out there's something called a physics material. And we want to make a physics material so that we'll make them bouncy. We'll have bouncy flowers. So I'll do create, and then this is a bazillion things, and we're looking for physics material on here. Physics material 2D. Yep. So the 2D one is better because it's not going to bounce in 3 dimensions. It's only going to 2. So I'm going to say, let's rename this. So we'll call it like bouncy 2D or something like that. Bouncy 2D. Okay. And then when I inspect it, it's going to be up on the right side. It's got friction of 0.4, so you could make them actually pretty slippery. And if I put a bouncy of like, let's do bouncy of 1, right? That's 1 unit of bouncy. So let's find out what happens with 1 unit of bouncy. Okay, now it's created, but it's not attached. So that means I need to go and add it to them. I'm going to try to see if I can do the shift click, select them all. And then I know that's where the bouncy physics should go. So I just drag over it, let go. And that should be good for them all. And we'll hit play and find out. And yeah, they're way bouncy. So it's super fun when you get all this stuff animated and running around. So this is something that's kind of interesting, is you could build the mural out, turn gravity on, and then have everything bouncing around, and people could try to play like a catch game and try to drag them back and like anchor them. So there are a few more things as you play with this stuff. There's a lot of ideas to have. So I would say this is the very simple, like, okay, we've got our basics. And now we have something that's basically in a 2D space that's got some physics to it, and then should really add some interesting flavor. And in future updates, we'll do a little bit of drag and drop and a couple other pieces. But this is going to be how you turn these things into functional, real 2D stuff. All right.